in case anybody is interested or would like an example, this is the one that I did for myself. So over here, we've got my managers, and then we've got my firefighter, and then we've got the kind of the more vulnerable manager and firefighter, and then we've got the exiles here. So I've kind of made it look like a castle where, because I like, you know, Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, and so that was the imagery that resonated with me. So out here, we've got the kind of, it's a manager, which I called the bannerman, which is kind of like, a bit like the performer. So it's sort of like saying, you know, look, you know, I've got all of these lovely, you know, I don't know, outfits and the pretty stained glass and the pretty glasses and all of those things that kind of almost like project who I am to an external world. And this kind of weirdly makes me feel safe. It's kind of like in a way, it's a little bit like, you know, when chimpanzees grin at each other to show that they're no threat. You know, it's like, I'm showing you that I don't mean any harm and I'm not trying to hurt anybody. And that's kind of like to try to stop people from attacking me, as well as being, you know, just like a creative kind of pursuit. Like there's a bit of a kind of secret passageway to the inner child, which is just that kind of playful, creative, blah, blah, blah. Then my proper line of defense is the puzzle solver. So this is the kind of the control freak. This is the thing that's like, I need to stay in control and I need nice lists and to-do lists and everything needs to be well ordered and well maintained. And that makes me feel safe. And if I can be productive and if I can be functional and all of those things, then that kind of keeps me nice and protected and no one can infiltrate that. Now there is a kind of, you know, Helm's Deep drain or gutter, which is kind of like a weak point there, where if it feels like that's being criticized directly, like, you know, you're too controlling or you're, I don't know, too anal or too something, it can kind of crack through into straight to the kind of exiles over here and, you know, be quite hurtful. So there's a little bit of a kind of weakness in the defenses there, but for the most part, that's kind of the thing that keeps things running smoothly. If people kind of crack through that defense, or if I'm feeling a bit kind of run down and tired, then sometimes this person, this one can flare up. And this is the first firefighter one. And this is, I called it the mama bear, because it's kind of like this fierce, protective kind of sort of feeling, which certainly I've felt has gotten stronger since getting pregnant. Like I feel like this one's gotten a bit more loud and quick to react, I might say. So this one, it's kind of like, it's either protecting my own inner children or other people. And it's kind of like just really vicious and, you know, back the fuck off kind of thing. And I definitely think this reminds me of mum at some times in the past. So I feel like that's where that one must be kind of coming from. Oh yeah, I might just mention that, you know, when this one is kind of being pushed, it's sort of like, it tends to either go into overdrive. It's kind of like, I need to control more and more and more and more and more, or it cracks and crumbles. And then it goes to this one, which is kind of like feeling overwhelmed and just basically crumbling into a big mess on the floor. You know, I can't do it. I can't do it. So yeah, so that's kind of like, those are the sort of main protectors, if you will, or the main defense systems. And then we come into the more inner sanctum here. So we've got the librarian or the sage advisor, and he's kind of like the soft manager. So he's kind of like giving information, you know, he wants to just go off into a library and read a million books and learn about how to make things better. And then he kind of informs these guys and informs this and informs that. He's just kind of like the informer that kind of tells everybody how to best get through the situation. So you could call him a helper instead of a manager. Maybe it's a bit blurry. Maybe he's more of a helper than a manager. And that kind of, I mean, that reminds me of Dad quite a lot, you know, like almost like find out the information and weigh up the evidence and all that kind of stuff. And then surprise, surprise, who could this possibly be? You know, but yeah, the other one, which is, again, it's kind of like, is it a firefighter or is it a healer? It's kind of like these ones are sort of like a little bit of both. And that one is the nurse, and that one's kind of like the soothing, you know, how can we make it better? You know, should we have a cup of tea? Should we, you know, sit down and have a rest, have a bath, that kind of thing. But sometimes this one can also be a bit substance abusey, and it can be a little bit like put a band-aid over it rather than actually kind of get to the source of the problem. So it's kind of like these guys are related to each other, and I've kind of put this thing in the middle, which is almost like if all of these three are working really nicely together, then it becomes this really cool healing force that's sort of like a shaman, but it's a bit blurry, and and it kind of gets tangled a bit. And then finally, basically the whole point of these guys are protecting everything, is the vulnerable children inside, which for me, the ones that stand out the most are the rejected preteen, which is the just before moving to Australia and after moving to Australia, and the point out one friend moment, and the you know bloody Naomi and Constance running away from me and me not being able to keep up with them because my heart wouldn't let me, and like basically passing out because of that. So just that feeling, all of the usual things about being unwanted and unvalued and all of that kind of stuff. Which when this part is feeling really good, it's more kind of playful and playing let's pretend games and projects out onto here, which is really nice. And then also there's the kind of overwhelmed baby toddler, which is kind of like before conscious memory. It's more this kind of physical kind of feeling of I can't do this, I can't do this, it's too much, it's too much. But when this one's feeling really happy, then it can be a bit more of like a demanding toddler, and it can be like, you need to do this and give me a cuddle and that kind of thing. So I hope that kind of helps to give a bit of a sense of what it can look like. And when I first mapped this all out, it actually looked a lot more negative. It was kind of like the puzzle solver was kind of like the control freak, and the mama bear was like just this vicious bear, and it was all had a bit of a negative spin on it. But since writing it out, I've kind of thought, again, like asking that question of, well, what do they want to be doing? What's their intention? What are they trying to achieve, rather than what are they doing when they're at their worst? And that kind of has helped me to kind of think, okay, well, the mama bear isn't trying to just attack people for no reason. It's trying to be kind of nurturing and protective. And so that just kind of helps to think about how can you tweak the system, how can you make things a little bit better. And yeah, so I don't know, I thought I personally am finding this very, very interesting and enjoyable, and I hope that it inspires some thought and reflection and interest in others.